Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
Okay, good. Welcome, everyone. This is Bible 101. And what we're simply doing is we're going to read through particularly the Old Testament stories as they would have been told around the campfires of ancient Israel. Things weren't in writing yet, and so they learned them as a story. And that is our goal, is at this level, let's just hear the story, not worry about theology and stuff like that. And for the most part, the book that we're using just simply tells the story. Outside of near the first, when we dealt with Adam and Eve, we've not had to make any kind of comment, just on the story. And so we start today then episode 10, I believe, if I've counted correctly, of Bible 101. We're going to be on page 33 in the book. Abraham offers Isaac. And I realize that it's been a couple of weeks since we were here. But if you were looking at the timeline, just to kind of know where we are, we're dealing with the life of Abraham now. The beginning of the story of Abraham and his family. So this is going to be a family story that we're going to be telling across this time period here. And the last time we were together, we talked about how Abraham had a son before he had Isaac. Does anybody remember the name of the son that Abraham had before Sarah had Isaac? Ishmael. Good. Anybody remember Ishmael's mother's name? Hagar. Whoa, wow, Hagar. Look at this. Look at you guys. This is wonderful. Hagar. And they eventually left the camp and went out. Did God abandon them? No. He didn't, did he? Sent an angel, rescued them, and promised to take care of them and that they would be a great people as well. So we now continue the story with Abraham and Isaac. It's going to be the family story traced through the son Isaac. And so we come to today's reading. Abraham offers Isaac. You're welcome to follow along. I think it's page 33. Or just listen as a child, hearing the story as we go. God knew how much Abraham loved Isaac. As the boy grew, Abraham loved him even more. Isaac was the child God had promised, and Abraham loved the boy as a gift from God. Abraham looked forward to the time when Isaac would become a man and have children also. These children would grow up and become the fathers of even more people, even as God had promised. As Isaac grew, Abraham taught him to know and worship God. Perhaps he took Isaac when he offered gifts upon the altar. Abraham told Isaac that God would accept the gifts and hear prayer, and trusted in him. The people in Abraham's day thought they must offer as a sacrifice to their God the dearest things they had, even their own children. God could never be pleased with such sacrifices. He wanted to teach Abraham this lesson and also to test his love for God. So God called to Abraham, and Abraham answered, "Behold, Here I am. And God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go into the land of Moriah. There give him back to me as an offering upon an altar which you will build at the place that I will show you. Abraham did not know why God asked him to do this. God had promised to make of Isaac a great nation, a great people. How could God keep his promise if Isaac is offered upon an altar? Abraham did not understand, but he was sure God knew best. He would obey. It would take several days to get to the land of Moriah. Abraham got ready to go. He called 2 men servants and Isaac, and after saddling his donkey, they started away. They took wood and fire to burn the offering. For 2 days they traveled. At night they slept under the trees. On the 3rd day, Abraham saw the mountain where God wanted the altar built. Abraham told the servants, stay here with the donkey while Isaac and I go to worship. Isaac carried the wood on his shoulder, and Abraham took the vessel of fire. As they climbed the mountain together, Isaac began to wonder why his father had not brought a lamb for an offering. He said, my father, see, here is the wood and the fire for the altar, but where is the lamb for an offering? Abraham replied, God will provide a lamb. When they reached the place that God had chosen, Abraham built an altar. He laid the wood upon it, and he tied Isaac's hands and feet and placed him on the altar. Then Abraham called out, Abraham, Abraham. The old man stopped to listen. The angel of God said, do no harm to Isaac. Now I know that you love God even better than you love your child. Untie his hands and his feet and let him go. And at this point, Abraham saw a ram, that's a male sheep, caught by his horns in the bushes. He offered the ram instead of his son Isaac. Afterward, the angel called to Abraham again and said, because you would have given me your dearly loved child, I will surely bless you and cause your family to be as the stars in the heavens and as the sands of the sea. And I will bless all the nations of the earth through your family, because you have obeyed my voice. It was a happy father and son who walked down the mountain. Now Abraham knew that he had pleased God, and Isaac knew that his life was precious in God's sight. Abraham called the place where he had built the altar, the Lord will provide. The two returned to the servants who were waiting and went back to their home at Beersheba. Here Abraham lived for many years. How many went with Abraham up to the mountain?
The servants and his son.
How many servants?
2 servants.
2 plus Abraham and Isaac. What was the name of the mountain?
Moriah.
Moriah. Okay, good, good. I didn't put you to sleep when I read it. Now we're continuing the story of what happens with Isaac as we began to then tell the next generational story after a wife for Isaac. When Sarah, Isaac's mother, was 120 years old, she died. Abraham bought a field that had a cave and buried Sarah in the cave. This burial place was called Machpelah. After Sarah's death, Abraham and Isaac felt lonely. Isaac was now a man. Abraham decided Isaac needed a wife. In those countries, the parents usually chose husbands and wives for their children. Abraham wanted to choose a good wife for Isaac. He thought about his brother Nahor, who lived in Haran. We remember when Abraham left the city of Ur? Remember that? We read it several weeks ago. And Ur would have been at the eastern end of Mesopotamia, near what is today the Persian Gulf. And he traveled through Mesopotamia westward, and it goes upward till you get to almost Turkey, and there would have been Haran, and the family stayed there, and from there Abraham and Lot had gone south into the promised land of Palestine. So Abraham is living here in Palestine, and he remembers his brother was still back in Haran, and so he thinks of going there to look for a wife for his son. Let me see where we are. Nahor, who lived in Haran. Nahor was the father of 12 sons himself. By this time, these sons were married and had grown-up children. Remember, Abraham was old and hadn't had any children, and Sarah was old, remember? But Nahor had already had children and now had grandchildren. Abraham called his trusted servant Eleazar, and said, "Go back to my old home where my relatives are and get a wife for Isaac." Eleazar knew the journey would be long and hard. Then what if Abraham's people were not willing to send a daughter into a strange country to become the wife of a man they had never seen? Abraham said, "If the woman is not willing to come back with you, I will not blame you." Can I just throw in an aside? Almost every immigrant group, including the immigrant group that founded us here in this parish, has gone back to the old country to get a bride or a husband. This isn't just something that happened once. This was a normal way, and our ancestors here of the church have done this, and not just ancestors, it still goes on among us, those particularly that still have family back in the Middle East that you're close with and you are connected with. You go back home and find a bride or a husband. And so this is the story. It's a human story. It's the way we behave today when we have come from an old country and have an old home and people back home to go home to. So faithful Eleazar said, "I will go." And Eleazar took him 10 camels, several servants, and many rich presents. For days and days they traveled across valleys, hills, and rivers, and by the great lonely desert. At last they came to the northern part of Mesopotamia, that is today called Iraq, and stopped near a well outside the city of Haran. It was evening, and the women of the city were coming to fill their pitchers at the well. Eleazar had learned to trust in Abraham's God. Now he prayed that God would show him a good wife for Isaac. Let it be, O Lord, that the young woman I shall ask to give me a drink will also water my camels. Then I will know that she is the one you have chosen to be Isaac's wife. Well, Eleazar prayed. A beautiful young woman came to get water. When she had, Eleazar asked for a drink. Although he was a stranger, she spoke kindly to him and offered to draw water for his camels also. Again and again she filled her pitcher and poured the water into the trough for the thirsty camels. When she had finished, Eleazar gave her 2 gold bracelets and an earring. He asked, "Whose daughter are you? Would your father have room to lodge us?" The girl said, "I am a Rebekah, the granddaughter of Nahor. There is plenty of room in my father's house for you." Then she hurried to tell her family about the man at the well and to show the beautiful presents he had given her. Eleazar knew his prayer had been answered. He bowed his head and worshiped God. When Rebekah's brother Laban heard her story and saw the rich ornaments that Eleazar had given her, he ran to meet the strangers at the well. "We have room for you and your camels," he said. They went with Laban. He brought water to wash their feet and food for them to eat, but Eleazar would not eat. "First, let me tell you why I have come," he said. "I am Abraham's servant. God has blessed my master greatly, giving him flocks and herds, silver and gold, and many servants. God also gave him and Sarah a son in their old age. Now Abraham has given all his great riches to Isaac. Because Isaac is not married, Abraham sent me to find a wife for Isaac." Eleazar told how Rebekah, in answer to his prayer, had offered water to him and his thirsty camels. Rebekah's father and brother Laban were willing to let her go with Eleazar because they believed that God had sent him. Rebekah too was willing. How thankful Eleazar was! He bowed his head once more to worship the great God who had helped him. Afterward, he enjoyed the feast that had been prepared. That same night, he gave other presents of silver, gold, and beautiful clothing to Rebekah and her family. The next morning, Eleazar said, "Now let me return to my master." Laban and his mother did not want Rebekah to leave them so soon. "Can you not stay for a few more days?" they asked. But Eleazar insisted that he must go at once. They called Rebekah, and she said, "I will go." So they said goodbye and sent her away with her nurse and other maids. On the homeward journey, Rebekah and her maids rode the camels. Eleazar led the way. Perhaps they traveled the same road, that Abraham had traveled many years before when he went to the land that God had promised. At last they were near the place where Abraham and Isaac lived. It was evening, and Isaac was out in the fields alone, thinking about God. When he saw the camels coming, he hurried to meet them. Rebekah asked, "Who is the man coming to meet us?" "This is my master Isaac," Eliezer replied. At that, Rebekah got down from her camel, covered her face with a veil. When Isaac met them, told how God had answered prayer and sent Rebekah to him. Isaac took her to the tent that had been his mother's, and she became his wife. He loved her, and she comforted him in the loss of his mother. Time passed, and finally Abraham died too. He was 175 years old. Ishmael heard of his death, and he came to help Isaac bury his father. They placed Abraham's body in the cave where Sarah was buried. By the way, the cave is still there. It's especially marked, and it says the Islamic part of Palestine, and is guarded then by the Muslims who honor Abraham through Isaac as the descendant of them as well. But the cave of Machpelah is still there, and I believe it's in the southern part of the land of Canaan that's there. Wow. What was Eliezer's prayer? What did he pray would happen? That would be a sign for him? That he was going to ask somebody for water?
Give him water.
Give him water, and the sign would be that she would give him water and his camels. Okay. And what was that girl's name? Rebekah. So Abraham and Sarah, and now we have Isaac and Rebekah. If I can throw in a comment, don't we mention them in our marriage ceremony for the new couple to be prosperous the way Isaac and Rebekah were? Okay, this is their story. Now, what happens next in the life of Isaac and Rebekah? You see, we've now passed from Abraham, and we haven't yet made it to Moses, but we're now telling the family story of the grandparents and then the parents, etc., that come into play of this wonderful family that God said that through your family I'm going to bless all the people on earth. Through this one family would be blessed because of their obedience to God. Okay, are we moving too quickly? Is this all right? All right. Esau sells his birthright. After some years, twin sons were born to Rebekah and Isaac. One was Esau. He was red-headed and hairy. Isaac dearly loved Esau. The younger twin was Jacob. He was not at all like his brother. He liked to stay around the tents. Jacob was his mother's favorite. As Esau and Jacob grew older, they were taught to work. They learned to take care of their father's cattle and sheep. Esau was fond of hunting. Often he took his bow and arrow to get a deer or some other animal. And when he got home, he dressed the meat and cooked it. This pleased Isaac very much. Maybe this is one reason Isaac loved Esau better than he did Jacob. In those lands, when the father died, the oldest son received twice as much of the property as did any of the other children. If there were 4 children, you could divide it by 5 pieces. Pieces went to the eldest, and everybody else just got 1 piece. So that's how the inheritance worked. The eldest got a double portion of whatever the division was going to end up being. This double portion was called the birthright because Esau was the oldest. Now they're twins, but Esau was born first and Jacob was born second. So because Esau was born first, he was considered the eldest, and he would then inherit the birthright, and the family lineage would pass on through him as the eldest. One day when Esau came home from his work in the field, he was very hungry. Jacob had been cooking, and the air was full of good smells. Food had never smelled better to Esau. He felt weak from his hunger, and he said, "Jacob, give me some of that red porridge, for I am weak with hunger." Jacob answered, "I'll give it all to you if you will sell me your birthright for this food." Bartering is already taking place, isn't it? Oh, isn't this just like us as kids, and not just as kids? Esau grew hungrier. He cared more about getting something to eat than he did for his birthright. What good will a birthright do me if I die of hunger? Esau wondered. So he sold his birthright for something to eat. Esau was very sorry that he had done this afterward. Children did Isaac and Rebekah have? 2. Twins? Which one was born first? Which one was born second? Jacob. Okay. Which one was the hunter? Esau. Which one was the gourmet chef? It was Jacob. Okay. All right. Isaac grew even richer and more powerful. His herds increased. He had many servants, and his crops yielded a bountiful harvest. All this made his Philistine neighbors jealous. They didn't want anyone to be richer or more powerful than they. Of course, the Philistines knew that if Isaac didn't have water, his cattle would die. His crops would fail, and he wouldn't be able to keep so many servants. So they filled his wells with dirt. Sounds like a bad TV show, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Fighting over water rights and cattle rights, and still goes on to this day. Then came Abimelech, leader of the Philistines, to Isaac. He said, "Move away from us. You are much mightier than we Philistines are. We don't feel comfortable with you so near." How easy it would have been for Isaac to stand on his rights and show the Philistines his power. But Isaac believed that peace was more important than getting one's way. Taking his cattle, his goods, and his servants, he set up camp in the valley of Gerar. Isaac called his servants to him and said, In this valley are wells that my father Abraham dug, but the Philistines have stopped them up. We will find these wells, dig them out, and have water for ourselves and the cattle." And just as Isaac had said, the servants found an old well. How hard they worked to dig out all the dirt, and how glad they were to water. Now everything would be all right. But all did not go well. The herdsmen of Gerar argued and fought with Isaac's herdsmen. "The water is ours," they shouted. "No," came the angry answer. "We dug out this well, and the water belongs to us." The fighting did not last long after Isaac heard about the trouble. Calling his servants to him, Isaac said, "Let us find another of my father's wells." And he had other wells in this valley that we can use. Let me throw in another aside. Maybe once upon a time you saw the Peter O'Toole movie, Lawrence of Arabia. And one of the most startling scenes occurs at the first when they're going across the desert and they come to the well. And from a long distance away, a different tribesman takes out his rifle, aims, and shoots the guy that has taken Lawrence to the well, because that guy was of the wrong tribe and wasn't permitted to be at that well. The fighting over water rights and wells is long-standing and would still have been taking place at least during World War I, when that movie was the history that it was set in. So, fighting. Maybe the servants didn't like the idea of looking and digging out, looking for and finding another well and digging it out, but they obeyed. This second well Isaac called Sitnah. Surely there would be no more trouble this time, but again the herdsmen fought about who owned the water. So a third time Isaac and his company moved and dug another well. There was no trouble over the water this time. Isaac said, "This well shall be called Rehoboth, for now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." That night the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, "I am the God of Abraham, your father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and will bless thee, and multiply thy children for my servant Abraham's sake." How Isaac his father's God had spoken to him and given him the promise, and with great joy Isaac built an altar to give thanks to the one true God. Soon thereafter, Isaac had a new reason for joy and thanksgiving. Two visitors came from Gerar, Abimelech, the leader of the Philistines, and his chief captain. When Isaac saw them, he said, "You hate me and sent me away. Why have you come to see me now?" These are the guys a while ago that told him to leave. And Abimelech answered, "We know the Lord is with you. We want to make a treaty, a peace treaty." Isaac agreed. He knew that hatred and fighting would never settle differences. Isaac became known throughout the land as one who lived peaceably and followed God's ways. Well, that's an interesting story, isn't it? Fighting over water And did Isaac mobilize all of his servants to stand their ground and fight? He kept moving, didn't he? Moving and moving and moving, and he got a reputation for being a fighter, for being a peacemaker. A peacemaker, and he got to live in the land. I don't know how many stories we can read at a time, but if you're still game, let's read one more maybe. Is that okay? Isaac blesses Jacob. Isaac lived at Beersheba until he became old and blind. Because Isaac thought he would soon die, he wanted to give the birthright, remember the inheritance, and his blessing to Esau, who was the firstborn of the twins. He called Esau and said, "My son, take your bow and arrow, go into the woods and hunt one more deer. Bring to me the delicious venison that you can prepare. After I have eaten, I will give you my blessing, for I shall soon die." Esau went to find a deer. How he wished he had not sold his birthright. Rebekah wanted her younger son, Jacob, to receive the birthright. And when he heard Isaac tell Esau to get the venison, she said to Jacob, "I will cook the tender meat of 2 young goats, and I'll season the food just as Esau does. You will wear Esau's clothes and take the food to your father. He will think you are Esau." The plot thickens, doesn't it? At first, Jacob was afraid his father would discover the truth and give him a curse instead of a blessing. But Rebekah urged him to obey her orders. "Let the sin be mine," she said. Isaac was surprised when Jacob brought the dish of food Rebekah had prepared. He knew Esau had not been gone long enough to have killed a deer and prepared the meat. "Have you come back so soon?" he asked. Jacob replied, "Your God helped me to find the deer at once." Still, Isaac wondered how it could be Esau. The voice sounded like Jacob's. Isaac said, "Come near that I may feel you and know you are Esau." Now Rebekah had covered Jacob's hands and necks with goat skin. When blind old Isaac touched the hairy hands, he said, "These are Esau's hands." And finally he ate the delicious meat, and he gave Jacob the blessing of his grandfather Abraham. After Jacob had gone away, Esau came. Rise up, my father, and eat my venison," he said. "Then give me your blessing." "Who are you?" Isaac asked. Esau said, "I am your son Esau." And the old man trembled. "Someone has come in your place," he said. He told Esau, "and I gave to him the blessing." Esau knew at once that Jacob, he wept bitterly. "Have you not one blessing for me also?" he pleaded. Isaac was deeply troubled. "How can I bless you after I have given the best of everything to your brother?" Still Esau pleaded for a blessing. Finally, Isaac blessed him too with a lesser promise of greatness. Now Esau hated his brother. Soon our father will die. Then I shall kill Jacob and take everything that has been given to him. I swear you could make a Hollywood movie or a TV series right here of a family betrayal by a wife to her husband. Look at all of this. No wonder they told the family story. They didn't clean up the story at all, did they? I mean, they're sitting around the fire, wow, telling the story. And the kids are listening to this the same way we are. What was Isaac's wife's name?
Rebecca.
That's Rebecca. And they had how many children? Two children. And who was supposed to get the birthright? Which one? Esau. Good, good. How come Esau gave it away? He was hungry. He traded the birthright, the blessing of being the eldest and carrying the family name for food. Okay. Who plotted the deception? Rebecca. Isn't that interesting? I'm sure there's a whole lot of stuff that could be said about the family and children. Aren't you glad I love your mother? Aren't you glad Mama loves me? I mean, look while you're reading this to your kids or your grandchildren. There's life lessons to be gently taught, don't you think, about love and obedience and kindness and respect inside a home and marriage? Wow. So, Esau says that when Dad dies, I'm going to
Kill him.
I'm going to kill Jacob. Boy, that's a cliffhanger. You'll have to wait till next season for season 3 when we come out to see. Look at this stuff. Jacob's dream. Rebecca heard that Esau planned to kill Jacob as soon as their father died. She sent for Jacob at once. You must get out of here, she told him. It is not safe here. Let me send you to my brother Laban, who lives in Haran. Perhaps Esau will forget his anger. Then you can come back to me. For why should I lose both you and your father? Rebekah did not tell Isaac that she was afraid Esau would kill Jacob. Instead, she told her blind husband, I am very unhappy because our son Esau has married Canaanite wives. If Jacob did that, I would not want to go on living. So Isaac called Jacob and said, do not marry a woman of Canaan, but go back to, my goodness, what a hard name, Padan Aram, and find a wife among your mother's people. God's blessing shall be upon you, and he will give you the blessings of your grandfather Abraham. Jacob said goodbye to his mother and his blind old father before starting on his long journey. He traveled alone. How afraid he was of Esau. Jacob wondered if he would ever return to his home and feel safe. What good was the birthright now? He could not wait until Isaac died to get the double share of his father's wealth, for then Esau would kill him. Poor, discouraged Jacob. How unhappy he must have felt as he climbed the rocky slopes of Canaan. Perhaps Jacob was afraid that Esau was already looking for him. Perhaps he was sorry he had tricked his old father. Now he must never see his father again. Perhaps he was even sorry he had bought Esau's birthright. Whatever his thoughts were as he traveled, God knew all about Jacob. When the sun went down, Jacob felt even lonelier. He was very tired, and so he chose a stone, a rock, for his pillow, wrapped his cloak about him, and lay down on the ground to sleep. He dreamed of a wonderful ladder that reached to heaven. Beautiful angels were going up, and God was standing at the top. Jacob dreamed that God spoke to him and said, I am the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The land upon which you are lying, I will give to you and to your descendants, and your descendants shall be as many as the dust of the earth. Through your family, I will bless all people. I will be with you and protect you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will never leave you until I have fulfilled this promise. Jacob awoke from his dream and looked about. He felt sure that God was there. In the morning he set up a stone that he had used for a pillow. He poured oil upon it and consecrated it to God. He called this place Bethel, which means the house of God. Then he promised to give back to God a tenth of everything if God would go with him and bless him. After this wonderful dream, Jacob's heart must have felt lighter. He hurried on his way. Every day he drew nearer the end of his long, tiresome journey through the desert. One evening, he saw men in a field near a well. Around them were 3 flocks of sheep waiting to be watered. He came nearer and asked the men, "Where are you from?" They replied, "We are from Haran." At last Jacob was near his uncle Laban's home. Do you know a man named Laban?" he asked eagerly. "Yes, we know him. Here comes his daughter Rachel with his sheep." Jacob saw a beautiful young shepherdess coming to the well, and he hurried to meet her. He rolled the stone away from the well, and he watered her sheep. And then he said, "I am one of your relatives, the son of your father's sister Rebekah." Jacob was so glad to see a relative after such a long journey that he kissed Rachel, and the tears rolled down his cheeks. Rachel hurried home to tell her father that Rebekah's son had come from Canaan and was at the well with the sheep. When Laban heard that Jacob had arrived, he hurried to welcome him. Laban was glad to hear from his sister Rebekah and to meet her favorite son. At first, he was very kind to Jacob. Jacob helped his uncle, and by the end of the month, Laban said, Let me pay you for your work. How much do you want?" Jacob replied, "I'll serve you faithfully for 7 years, if then you will give me your beautiful daughter Rachel to be my wife." Jacob loved Rachel and wanted to marry her. He loved her so much that 7 years seemed like only a few days. When the 7 years were up, Jacob reminded his uncle of their agreement. Laban arranged a marriage feast and invited many friends to the wedding, and in the evening he brought the bride to Jacob. A veil covered her face, and no one could see her. This was the custom. After the ceremony, Jacob wanted to see his bride. He lifted the veil, but it was not the beautiful Rachel whom he loved. Instead, it was her older sister Leah. How unhappy he was. His uncle had tricked him. Perhaps Jacob remembered how he had tricked his blind father and had cheated his brother out of a blessing. Seemed to run in the family then, didn't it? These tricksters. Jacob demanded of Laban, "What have you done to me? Didn't I work 7 years for Rachel? Then why did you cheat me?" Laban said, "It is not the custom in our country to let the younger daughter marry first. If you will serve me for 7 more years, you may have Rachel also for your wife." In those days, most men had several wives, and because Jacob loved Rachel, he decided to work for her too. And Rachel too became his wife. Can I just throw in a comment? If I were looking at my own children, I would look at them, sons and daughters, and tell them they had to be careful who they wanted to marry, because everybody puts on a good face. And Jacob was not the first person that thought he married Rachel and got a Leah instead. Or vice versa, however you want to tell the story. This is people. This is life. This is...
I hope it wasn't personal.
You hope what?
That wasn't a personal.
Oh. I got a Rachel when I'm in trouble, I can tell immediately. After 14 years, Jacob wanted to return to Canaan. Laban did not want him to go. "While you have been with me," he told Jacob, "the Lord has blessed me for your sake." Jacob said, "But how am I to provide for my family?" Laban agreed to let Jacob have part of the cattle and sheep and the goats. Jacob separated these from Laban's. Jacob had his sons take care of them, while he looked after Laban's flock. So they divided the flocks. Jacob then has children, and they take care of his stuff, while Jacob himself continued to take care of Laban's stuff. By this time, Jacob was the father of 11 sons and a daughter. Because Jacob became rich, Laban's sons were now jealous. They said, "Jacob got his riches dishonestly." Laban too began to feel envious. The angel of God spoke to Jacob in a dream and said, "I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the stone and made a promise to me. The time has come for you to return to your people in Canaan. I will be with you." Jacob was afraid Laban would not let Leah and Rachel Canaan. Jacob decided to go away secretly. That's what he did when he left Mom and Dad back home, right? Secretly left, and now he's secretly getting out of town again. He waited until Laban went to shear the sheep. Then he called Leah and Rachel out into the field and said, "Your father no longer feels kindly toward me. God has told me to return to Canaan." "We are ready to go," they replied. "God is with you." Busy days followed. Jacob got ready to start out on the long road that he had traveled 20 years before. The sheep, the goats, the cattle, and the camels were all brought from the fields. The servants drove the animals while Jacob's wives and children rode on the camels. Across the fields they went and onto the road which wound along the lonely wilderness. Wild mountains were on one side, and on the other side the dreary desert sand stretched into space. Finally they came to a camping place at Mount Gilead. Here they stopped to rest. Things were happening back in Haran. Someone told Laban that Jacob had gone everything he owned. How angry Laban was. "I shall overtake him," he said. Perhaps he planned to make Jacob return to Haran. He took several men and hurried after Jacob's company. For 7 days they followed fast. At last they saw the tents Jacob had pitched at Mount Gilead. Before they reached Gilead, God warned Laban not to harm Jacob. God called Laban's anger to cool. He did not even quarrel with Jacob. Afterwards, Jacob set up a stone for a pillar, and the other men gathered stones together in a heap. Laban called this heap of stones Mizpah, which means a watchtower. And he said to Jacob, "May God watch over us while we are absent from each other." Then bidding his daughters and their children a loving goodbye, he started back to his home at Haran. And Jacob and his family traveled on toward Canaan. So we've almost completed the story of Esau and Jacob. Esau being tricked, Jacob has to leave so he doesn't get killed. And now he's been 20 years away, has gotten married, has two. What are the two wives' names? Who's the first wife's name? Leah. And the second wife? Rachel. And after 20, what was Leah and Rachel's dad's name? Laban. And so they're sneaking out of town and they're headed back, right? Well, remember, why did Jacob leave Canaan in the first place, back home? Why did he leave his first home in the first place? Because he thought his brother was going to kill him, right? So it's been 20 years and he's going back home. So who do you think he's worried about? Esau. I wonder if he's still mad and wants to kill me. So let's find out. Although 20 years had passed since Jacob's flight from Canaan, he never forgot his fear of Esau. What if Esau never forgave him? What if Esau still wanted to kill him? God knew about Jacob's fear and sent a company of angels to meet him. They gave Jacob courage. He sent messengers to tell Esau of his coming. If Esau didn't welcome him home, Jacob could not be happy in Canaan. But Esau no longer lived in Canaan. With his family, he had moved to the country of Edom, south and east of the Dead Sea. Would that be Jordan today in that area? I should have looked at a map. There the messengers told him of Jacob's coming. He said he would come to meet Jacob and bring 400 men with him. That sounds like a small army, doesn't it? Jacob was terribly afraid. He thought Esau planned to kill him and his wives and children. He quickly divided his company into two groups. If Esau attacked one group, the other group would be safe. Jacob asked God to protect him. In the morning he sent sheep and oxen, camels, and other animals to his brother. How much Jacob wanted to please Esau. That night a strange man wrestled with Jacob. At dawn Jacob saw he had been wrestling with an angel of God. The angel said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." Jacob answered, "I will not let you go until you bless me." The angel asked, "What is your name?" "My name is Jacob," he answered. The angel said, "You will be called Israel, because you have power with God and man." Israel means a prince of God. Jacob called this place Peniel, which means the face of God. Jacob walked on with his company. When he looked up, he saw Esau coming to meet him. His heart pounded as he stepped forward to meet his brother. Jacob bowed himself to the ground. 7 times he bowed. Esau ran to Jacob, threw his arms about him, and kissed him. All was forgiven. Jacob presented his wives and their children and told him how God had blessed him. Esau asked, "What about the animals that were brought to us?" "They are a present for you," Jacob said. At first Esau refused them because he too was rich in cattle. Finally, he accepted them as a gift from Jacob. After a short visit, Esau returned to his home in Edom, and Jacob went on to Canaan. At Shechem he bought a field, built an altar, and worshiped God. He thanked God for the safe journey from Haran. Later, Jacob moved to Bethel, then toward his old home at Hebron, where his father Isaac still lived. Many years had passed since Jacob had traveled that same road, alone and afraid. Now he was returning to his father's house, bringing his family and many servants. Surely God had blessed him, and his heart was glad. Before they arrived at Hebron, Rachel died. She left a tiny baby boy whose name was Benjamin, and Jacob buried her at Bethlehem and marked her grave with a stone. When Jacob reached Hebron, he found his father expecting to die. How happy Isaac must have been to have Jacob home again. Isaac was now 180 years old. When he died, Esau came and helped Jacob bury him. Wow, we covered the story of Isaac and what was his 2 wives' name? Leah and Rachel. And his brother was Esau. We have covered the story of Abraham and how he left Mesopotamia to Haran, down to the Promised Land. We've now gone to the son Isaac. And what was Isaac's wife's name? Rebecca. And they had twins, right? And the twins, the boys, what were their names? Esau and Jacob. We got the story of them stealing the birthright, mama tricked and all this stuff, right? Jacob's got to leave for his life. And then Jacob ends up with how many wives? Two, and they are Leah and Rachel. Okay. And on their way back from living in Haran to get to Palestine, in Palestine before they got back to Isaac, who died? Which one of his wives? Rachel died. And where was she buried? Or she died where? In Bethlehem. Okay. Well, I guess next week, God willing, we'll be able to find out what happens next in the next generation of this story that we're telling about. So, wow. Well, God bless you for being here today. Those of you watching online and those of you watching on the video, we're grateful for your coming and participating. And all we're doing is just hearing the stories and beginning to get them in us and to see we have been grafted into this family's story. So these are our ancestors, if you will, as well. So we don't have to leave. You're welcome to talk and fellowship, and there's goodies over here, but this will end our session for today. Thank you. Thank you.
Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Praise the Lord, O my soul. I will praise the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praises to my God while I have peace.